From ELCA Advocacy, this is Here I Pod. There's so much happening in our communities every week and every day that are impacted by policies at the local, state, and federal levels. Here I Pod will focus on one aspect of what's happening each episode by talking with faith-based advocates, as well as providing steps that you can take in your own advocacy efforts. In Episode 4, we're discussing the wide-reaching effects of the foreign assistance funding freezes in an extended interview between our host, Regina Banks, and Patricia Kisare, Program Director for International Policy with the ELCA. After the interview, Hunger Advocacy Fellow Joey Chen will join Regina to discuss how you can take action. This episode will close with a faith reflection from Franklin Ishida, Director for the Asia and the Pacific regions for the ELCA. Here's Regina to get us started.
Hi, my name is Regina Banks, and I am the Director of the Lutheran Office of Public Policy, California. And today for Here I Pod, I have with me Patricia Kisare, Program Director for International Policy with the ELCA. Hello, Patricia.
Thanks for having me today.
Patricia, can you briefly describe your portfolio for the ELCA?
Yes. Hello, everyone listening. So my portfolio or the issues that I'm responsible for on behalf of the church are, one, making sure that U.S. foreign assistance to other countries is actually prioritized by the U.S. government when it comes to appropriations. So let me say a little bit about what that means. So U.S. foreign assistance is basically any assistance that our government provides to other countries. And that includes all humanitarian and disaster relief to countries experiencing disaster. It also includes economic development programs that deal with gender justice and also promoting human rights as well as promoting democracy and good governance. So it's an array of varied programs that U.S. government supports or has supported historically in its engagement with other countries. And then peace building is another aspect, making sure that as the U.S. government engages with other countries who are either in conflict or are in a fragile state, meaning they are teetering around getting into conflict, there are programs that are meant to either try to prevent conflict from occurring or in a situation where there's an active conflict, engaging with partners around the world to help end those conflicts. So you may have heard things like peace agreement between country Y and X, and those are engagements that usually are funded by the U.S. government through State Department. So that's just an example. Final example I can give, Regina, is around gender justice. So ensuring that women and girls, for example, are included in the agenda for economic development. When you're dealing with human rights issues, making sure that concerns that are very specific for women and girls, in this case, are accounted for.
I don't know whether I've ever heard you say all of the different pieces of your portfolio before. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Those are all so important. I'm glad to know that somebody is looking out for those things. Within that broad portfolio, has anything interesting happened since January 20th and the things that you're working on?
Yes, sure. So since January 20th, when President Trump was inaugurated, when President Trump took oath, he signed an executive order. He signed many executive orders, but one of them has to do with U.S. government foreign assistance to other countries.
Is that the USAID?
Yes, USAID is included, but there are about 26 agencies of the U.S. government who have some kind of authority to engage internationally, but USAID is the largest one. Others include CDC and some other agencies that have some level of international engagement. But in this case, the executive order that was signed on January 20th basically directed all agencies that handle U.S. foreign assistance to suspend that assistance pending a review by the new administration. And that review is supposed to be for 90 days.
Is that unusual? Don't agencies typically go through reviewing processes?
Yes, actually, it's not unusual. New administrations always have their own ideas about the ways they want to engage with other countries, including about the ways they want to administer U.S. foreign assistance. The unusual part is the complete suspension of that U.S. foreign assistance, because it's been the case where you are doing a review as a new administration, you are still providing this assistance as you're doing a review. So unfortunately, President Trump decided that they wanted to suspend everything as they entered that review process. And that has had some real consequences.
Have you seen any of those consequences with respect to any of the programs or projects that the ELCA either has on our own or that we accompany our companion churches in?
That's a good question. The answer is yes, but let me clarify something. So the ELCA as a church doesn't receive any funding on foreign assistance program, but our companion partners individually would sometimes apply for a grant through either U.S. missions in countries as subgrantees of other organizations. And so some of those companion partners who had a grant, who had a partnership with other NGOs meaning non-government organizations, have been impacted. For example, I know some of our companion partners who have programs that deal with people who are living with HIV/AIDS have been impacted. Some of our companion partners have been impacted on providing humanitarian assistance around refugee camps and so forth.
One of these partners shares their experience with us now. You're about to hear portions of a conversation with Dr. Godson Maro, Chief of Party for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Tanzania's Kizazi Hodari program. The voice of Daudi Msema, ELCA Regional Representative to East Africa, will occasionally also be heard in the conversation.
Okay, my name is Dr. Godson Maro. Actually, this job has a significant impact to the lives of thousands of people. We have been supporting orphan children who they have lost their parents and they are either HIV infected or HIV affected. They need love, they need support. As we work through family-focused implementation of our activities, it is always rewarding when you see a sick child improving and returning back to the school, seeing that the families are together, working together with the families, supporting them economically, but also being able to support the families to be able to seek health services, other social services, etc. So this work is really rewarding in terms of number of people we have reached and the support we are providing and the appreciation of life we are saving through this project. So first of all, Kizazi Hodari project is a comprehensive one. As say that it's child-focused but family-centered. So the first thing is we identify children, orphan children in the community who have been exposed to HIV. Either their parents or one parent or both parents have died of HIV. And then we refer them to the facility for testing so that they can know their status. And then we do make sure that they're schooled. This is another component. They go to school. We have a component of nutrition where we also link the families, those destitute families, with the support of nutrition from various other partners and other sources. Actually, as the HIV spread all over the world, it came with many other related problems. So when you talk of HIV/AIDS, you're not only talking about the virus, because the virus affects and disrupts the entire social community arrangement. For example, you're talking of a parent who just died of HIV and then left out a children who is also HIV positive. Yes, we have ARV drugs, which helps a lot significantly, but now we need to stop the spread. We need to stop the spread so that other people cannot get HIV.
24th of January, what happened?
Yeah, so the current project we are implementing is full funded by USAID Tanzania through PEPFAR. And for us, we have been implementing this project in nine regions of Tanzania mainland, or for the 8 councils. And our target for this year was to reach out to around 160,000 people. We on 24th we received the letter, which indicate that we must stop working, and we'll have to only have the minimum spending of funding from U.S. government. And then on 12th of February, we received another communication saying that the assessment which was done to your program confirmed that you are doing life-saving activities. So please write to us a proposal for only life-saving activities. And we wrote a proposal, submitted to USAID Tanzania. They reviewed, they had some questions. We respond to some of those questions. And on 18th of February, we were given approval to continue with implementation. But now, while we recall the staff back to go and implement only life-saving activities, on 26th of February, we received another termination. Now, this is a termination letter, not only stop work order, but a termination letter. This termination letter was sent globally, I think, to many other projects, similar letter with the same information that the award is terminated, and we should terminate all the contracts in sub-awardee. And then the fourth, the additional details are forthcoming. That was the letter which we received on 26th of February. And then from there, we have not received any other communication until now.
Can you tell about what it's going to mean?
We have a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the government, central government. And this is a contract between Evangelical Lutheran Church in Tanzania and the government of Tanzania through their ministries. We have a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Health, and as well as the President's Office, Ministry of Region and Local Authority. And as well as we do have another memorandum of understanding between Ministry of Community Development, Gender and Women and Special Groups, and ELCT. All those contracts stipulate what we are going to deliver through this program and what the government is going to deliver. So first of all, it means we are not delivering on our part, on what we agreed with the government at that level, but as well as at the regional and at the district level. That is one part which is affected. That one is also we are not delivering what we agreed. And the biggest part is our beneficiaries, the children, orphanage children who are living with HIV or who have been affected by HIV. They actually receive a comprehensive support, as previously said. And this includes a visit, psychosocial support, escort, referrals to the facility, ensuring that their nutrition is stable. For children under 5 years, we do even measure their nutritional status. And those ones who have severe malnutrition, we immediately act on that and make sure that they get the proper services for nutrition. Those ones who have advanced HIV disease, they get proper medication, they get proper management so that they can go back to school. We know that we have been providing this support to the families, and the families have been depending on us, and we also work with community health workers who receive some travel allowance to go and visit these families. So all of these are not going on. So our expectation is that we have broken the chain of services for these children, the orphan and vulnerable children. We have stopped the work to our staff. As we were told not to use funding, we have not received any fund from January, from this executive order when it happened until now. So contracts which we had with our vendors and the suppliers have not been paid. So we have a bigger group of categories of all these individuals, organizations, companies, ministries, and various institutions which have suffered from this work stop order.
Okay, this is painful in many different directions.
Sure.
Is this more than a job?
Definitely. The way we work and the nature of our work is really comprehensive, and some of these families has become friends, and really friends to our workers, because they visit them, they pray together, they sometimes eat together, they sometimes you go to visit the family, they have a challenge, they don't have sugar, they don't have flour, they don't have food. Some of our staff, they usually provide a direct funding from their salaries to support this.
From their own pockets.
From their pockets, yes. So you talk of, you speak with a couple of my colleagues here, they will tell you that we're being called, when are you coming back? We don't see you, why are you not visiting us? And so forth. So you'll see that it's very painful. And the way we left, because it was abrupt, it was sudden. So you are told you cannot go to the office to work from Monday. Even those ones who they need to return for the testing at the facility, for refill of their drugs, for the nutritional support, they all need to get that support which is missing. Yeah, so this is a very painful moment for all these categories of individuals.
Now, let's rejoin the conversation with Regina and Patricia about how these experiences, U.S. federal policy, and our advocacy intersect.
Have you shared any of these concerns that you have with Congress or with congressional staff? If so, what have been their responses?
Yes, so we have been meeting with so many offices on this issue since the executive order was signed, because right away we knew what the problem will be. We knew the impact was going to be great. And this is because the US as a country and the US government in general has had a very large role in the world around providing for humanitarian assistance and development assistance to other countries. So in our meetings with members of Congress, their staff, mostly their staff, we have relayed and shared this information that we're hearing from companion partners about the impact of the actions of the president related to US foreign assistance. I want to emphasize here, this is not theoretical. This is actually, when we talk about impact, it's people's lives. So making sure that we actually share the raw stories of that impact on individual lives has been a priority for us. We've been meeting with Republican offices, we've been meeting with Democratic offices, and making sure that they hear about these stories, and we are collaborating with other advocacy partners, based organizations who are also experiencing similar impact with their partners overseas, and really bring it home to make sure that they know these are life-saving programs, and now those lives are in danger because of these actions. In terms of how they've been responding, I think it's been different depending on who you are talking to.
Sure.
Is important for the country and the goodwill of the American people, because this is taxpayer money, is good for American engagement around the world. So that's one aspect. The other aspect, I think, a lot of members claim or declare that they subscribe to a particular faith tradition. And as you know, and as many of us know, a lot of these faith traditions teach us to care for our neighbor, to be, good brothers and sisters, to make sure that we save lives, whatever chance we have. And so I think that's a connection that a lot of members of Congress have to this work. I think the challenge for many of them is, and we're hoping this will change, is taking the next step and make sure that they speak forcefully against what's happening, and hopefully to change the direction of the policies that we have right now.
Are these programs, in your view, of the U.S. government, is it charity? Is the United States doing charity all over the world?
I think that's up for interpretation. In my view, I don't consider this to be charity. I think foreign assistance allows the US government to engage with other countries in a way that is really beneficial for the US in general, in terms of soft power, but also in terms of building goodwill from other people around the world, both in communities, but also in their daily engagement with government to government matters. But, from our end as a church, we see that as a moral responsibility to be able to provide assistance to those among us who are in need, and not just here at home, but also around the world, because we are all children of God. So that's an important aspect of foreign assistance as well.
And just for clarity, you mentioned soft power. Can you give a bit of an explanation of what that is?
Yes, that's a good question. The way I conceptualize soft power is basically allowing countries to build relationships without force. And we have a very big military in this country, and so some other countries. But I think prioritizing things that are not military oriented is the best approach to human relations. And also it allows for actual one-to-one engagement, whereas the opposite of that is force, doing things by force, which is harmful and can lead to detrimental consequences. And, our mantra as the ELCA is being in companion with communities around the world, recognizing that we're all children of God. And so it's something that is really rooted in how we understand relationships as a church.
So you mentioned that the current administration came in, suspended all of the funding pending a review, which was unusual. Are there any ELCA projects or ELCA companion church projects for which you are especially concerned?
So yes, we have already heard from our companion churches that they have been impacted by this decision. But I want to clarify for our audience that the ELCA by itself doesn't receive funding from the US government for any of the programs that we support. The companion churches do, where they're able, apply for grants, US government grants, to implement different programs in their communities. For example, you have some companion churches who were able to get grants through USAID missions in their countries to have programs that support people who are living with HIV virus, to support them, making sure that they get access to medicine, making sure that they're able to have livelihood for their families, education, and so forth. You have companion partners who had support from the US government for food provision, so for food aid in different countries. Those have also been curtailed, or in some cases canceled, because of this decision by President Trump. One thing I want to add here, Regina, also is that in a lot of places around the world, churches and faith-based organizations are really involved in community affairs. So when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to, food production or food provision, small scale to large scale, rural areas to cities, you find churches and faith-based organizations doing this work. So there's a big role for our companion communities in those countries, and it's really important to make sure that they're able to continue that work.
I hear so much uncertainty in what you just said, that if the US has now become unreliable to people who are looking for food and are trying to get clean, safe water and medicine, that is a lot of upheaval.
Yeah. Having myself, I was born in a different country and raised there. And one thing I've always experienced living outside of this country and then living in this country for more than, a decade, there was a sense that Americans are very giving people. And I think a big part of that is both the giving that happens privately from private individuals, whether through churches or through some other entities, to support different programs around the world to uplift people from whatever bad experience they may have or they may be going or experiencing. I'm sorry. So the sentiment that Americans are very giving people has always been part of the fabric of this country. And so I think there's a sense of shock and surprise that I'm getting from partners that I'm speaking with. It's almost, I think they didn't expect that. Part of our framing and part of our engagement with other countries has always been, this is the character of our country. This is who we are, including being as giving or being as engaging or, promoting justice and human rights. There are resources that are needed for those things. And those resources are given as part of U.S. foreign assistance. And so there's a big shift of that framing that is happening now, and people don't know what to do with it. I think they're still processing, and they are hoping that it will be reversed because it's almost like the America they don't recognize.
They don't recognize. Have you shared these concerns with Congress? Have you shared it with congressional members, staff, people that work near the Hill?
Yes. So we have been busy meeting with congressional offices, particularly their staff, and sharing and expressing concerns that we have as ELCA related to this, but also concerns that our companion churches are sharing with us. So, the suspension of healthcare services, that has a life-saving impact. If you used to get free medicine or cheap medicine for whatever ailment you have, and now you don't have that, that could be a life and death situation. If suddenly, you are used to getting 2 meals a day and suddenly you can get one, that is a life-saving situation. So it's good when they're, giving funds, and these funds are used to support particular programs. In this case, the funding was already appropriated for. So this is not new funding. This is funding that Congress had already appropriated to make sure that these programs continue because they are life-saving programs. And so they need to hear that the actions of our executive branch are having the counter impact from what you intended when you appropriated these funds.
What kind of response are you getting to that storytelling?
Mostly, there's a level of understanding that I've experienced in both Republican and Democratic offices, to be honest. I think from the human level, and I think this is something that you don't always see on TV, at the human level, they get it. And they get it because it saves lives, but also because there's a level of benefit that as a country we get. As I said earlier, it builds goodwill for our country, soft power for our country and such. But our main concern as a church is to save lives. I think there's a sense of lack of clarity on members' part in terms of how they move forward. Some of them maybe have some fear of political consequences, so they're not public in their opposition. So we kind of try to encourage them to get over the hump and do something bold to reverse course. I always like to say, America doesn't exist in isolation. We live in a world where we're so interconnected that when something happens in the Democratic Republic of Congo, it doesn't mean that it won't happen in the U.S. So, for example, often people point to Ebola and most recently COVID-19, infectious diseases that started somewhere else and made their way to our country. So if you don't have the ability to engage with the source countries when you have a threat of a pandemic, most likely that can get to the U.S. Who knows how bad that can get. There's also the question of, I don't like to use this, and as a church, we don't use this, but other countries provide a big market for Americans. For example, a lot of the food aid commodities. So whether you're talking about wheat and in some cases corn and some other food aid commodities that end up being purchased to ship overseas to support some communities who are maybe experiencing a disaster, they are sourced from our farmers in Kansas, farmers in Minnesota who are selling their food commodities to the U.S. Department of Ag, who then work with what used to be USAID, and then they ship those overseas.
So it sounds like, yes, moral obligation, yes, obligation of the all that we are meant to do from our moral positioning, but also enlightened self-interest. There's a lot there for us to be working on just out of enlightened self-interest.
Absolutely.
So,
And if I may say something, there have been polling that have shown that Americans actually support a higher level of U.S. foreign assistance or foreign aid than what is actually provided or was provided before the suspension. So right now, as of 2023, all the U.S. foreign assistance was only like less than 1% of the federal budget, which is a very small amount of resources, especially when you compare to the big impact they have around the world. Some last polling that I saw, you get a range anywhere between 7 and 10% as the range that Americans support for
really,
assistance. So there's almost a disconnect, and maybe it's a messaging problem, but there's a disconnect there in terms of what actually happens and what Americans actually support. So that, I think, paints a very unique picture.
I didn't realize that. That's very interesting. What would you like to leave people with?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think I have a lot of things, but I think one thing I want people to remember is this is not just theory. This is not just numbers on a piece of paper. This is lives we're talking about. The HIV program that I mentioned earlier, for example, is called PEPFAR. It was started by President Bush in 2003. Before that, anybody who was diagnosed with HIV expected to live a very short life in countries in Africa, especially because they didn't have access to medicine. And whatever medicine was around was too expensive for most individuals in those contexts. But that program made it so that most people who are living with HIV can actually have access to medicine. Not all, but a lot of them started to having access. If you look at PEPFAR from 2023 and now, it's estimated that PEPFAR has saved 25 or more million lives. Think about that. That's a lot of people that would otherwise die or would have some level of difficulty finding resources. That's just one example, and that's lives. You can talk about hunger, in the ELCA, hunger is a big priority for us. There's so many people who are living in the communities or in the space where there's conflict with the climate change. They were not able to produce food for their families, and sometimes they need food aid. But also not just food aid, there's also a level of foreign assistance that deals with sustainability of families. So not just giving people food aid, but helping them to build the capacity to be able to produce food for themselves. And that way they don't depend on food aid, or they're able to kind of sustain their lives in some other way, whether it's income generation. There's so many different aspects of development that happens through foreign assistance. So when you remove that, it means those folks who would be self-sustaining probably will fall into a place where they need food aid again instead of producing aid for themselves, and that is a impact on people's lives. So I really just want to leave people with imagining a neighbor, imagining little kids that right now their lives are really at risk. I love to talk about the HIV piece because it's very poignant, and we were at the point where so many babies were born HIV free, even though their mothers had HIV, because they had access to medicine.
Yeah.
And so now if you're a pregnant woman and you suddenly can access that, it means your newborn might be born with HIV, and because of this freeze. But if we were able to continue those programs, that child would be born HIV free, which means you have less people who will be HIV positive over time. I can go on and on. There's so many examples. There's so many examples related to gender justice issues when it comes to preventing gender-based violence for women and girls in different countries. But I just want to end with this image of lives beneath these conversations, beneath these numbers. Their brothers, their sisters, their children, their mothers, their fathers, and they have basic needs like we have. And so when we're thinking about policy, for me, that is really at the forefront of my thoughts. I've seen so much of what happens when there's nothing, whether it's refugee camps, whether it's a community that is being displaced because of a conflict. It's really very basic things, but it's like always a life at stake.
You're clearly very passionate about the work that you do and the ministry that you steward here for the ELCA. Again, thank you so much for the work that you do. I have just one last question, and that is, given everything that we have talked about in the last half hour, where have you seen the gospel recently?
Yeah, I'm working very hard to hold onto the gospel as some of these actions have been taken. I think what I've seen in terms of people's response to the administration's executive order, for example, or when we send action alerts for people to engage, there's a lot more interest in what's happening. People feel like they want to do something to make things better, both within our network, within the church, but also within communities around the country that are beyond just ELCA members. As we know, Regina, you and I know that political pressure is the main thing that changes policy. And so that energy that has been generated is an opportunity for political pressure to shift policy actions. So for me, that's the gospel. That's the hope that I'm clinging on. Even on days when things seem very bleak and you don't get the answers you want from congressional offices, or you don't feel like things are moving fast enough, just hold on to some of what I'm seeing from our communities. So, I'm really hopeful, and I think that some of this will lead to positive actions eventually, but it can come fast enough.
Amen. Patricia Kisare, Program Director for International Policy of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you, Regina.
Joey, we've just spent a really enlightening several moments with Patricia Kisare talking about the state of U.S. foreign assistance. What can people at home do to help move the needle?
And so I think there are a few different things that come to mind. In previous episodes, we had talked about the ELCA Action Center that has action alerts where you can find out sort of what the ELCA, what our advocacy office is working on, and where there are sort of things that we would like people who are part of our network to take action on. And currently there is an action alert on calling on members of Congress to end the foreign assistance funding freeze that is currently in place. So if you go to the ELCA Action Center, you can take a look at that and it'll take you directly to the ways in which you can contact your senators or representatives. I think apart from that, but certainly related to that, encouraging folks to also contact their representatives, contact their senators, and let them know that they support these programs. We have recently seen a lot of energy around different action alerts, but specifically with regards to the action alert calling for the end of the foreign assistance funding freeze. There were over 4,600 emails sent out to representatives or senators. So a lot of energy around this, a lot of folks who want to be engaged, who want to be involved.
Thank you to everyone who's had the opportunity to do that. For everyone else, please join in on the fun. It's easy and you can find it right there on our website. Thank you again, Joey.
Thank you. Before we conclude, here's a faith reflection from the Reverend Franklin Ishida, ELCA Director for Asia Pacific, on a Christian perspective of assisting our neighbors next door and across the globe.
According to the Bible, early Christians went as far as sharing everything in common. In today's world, I don't think that's realistic, nor really needed, perhaps. But I do believe we need to consider our stewardship in the world, our stewardship of the earth's resources, the stewardship of our time and treasures, the stewardship of our responsibilities as Christians in church and society. Now, the United States makes up 4.22% of the world's population. Meanwhile, we consume 25% of the world's resources. This makes me wonder about how we, as citizens of this nation, may fit in today's world and our stewardship within the world. Do we dare share our wealth and resources with the world? Up till now, U.S. foreign assistance made up only about 1% of the annual federal budget. As responsible citizens and Christians, we want to stand behind the U.S. government. Of course, the Bible doesn't say anything about government foreign aid. But in the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus speaks of loving our neighbor as ourselves and extending that care and love to everyone, the foreigner, the stranger, and all those in need. And so adding to our own church-based stewardship that may extend the work of the church around the world, we believe our government plays a critical role in fulfilling the moral responsibility of all Americans. Our faith also compels us to seek our government to extend our stewardship to the world, to seek justice for all.
This concludes this episode of Here I Pod. If you want to contact us, you can email us over at elcaadvocacypodcast@elca.org or leave us a voicemail. Thank you for listening.